Today we're talking about pots. That's with an S and not the one you smoke. The very first thing you need to consider when attempting to select a pot for a tree is that tree worthy of a pot? Right over here we have one living Japanese maple with another dead one. Now, you could call these bonsai trees, but in reality they're just seedlings in a pot. Keeping it in a plastic pot or even putting it into a larger grow container so that it can get some weight to it is preferred. If you were to put that in a ceramic container, yes, the tree is going to look a little nicer, but you're actually not helping it in any way. You're just restraining its root system. Now, if we were to look at a tree that is worthy of a pot, there's a few things we have to consider. Now, you have to look at a tree and understand the proportions required to put it into that pot. The first one is that the length of the pot, this measurement here, is determined by measuring the tree, and 2/3 of that height is the length of the pot. There is one exception to this. If the tree is actually shorter than it is wider, you use 2/3 the width of the tree. Pretty simple. The height of the pot is determined by measuring the thickness of the trunk at the base where it touches soil. What you want is a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning this dimension is the same as this. Now, the last dimension you have to consider is the basic depth of the pot. It's actually pretty simple. You want it to be a little smaller than the distance between the furthest back branch and the furthest forward branch, which means if you were to take your hands like this, you'll hit both branches as you come up. It's actually very simple to get the proportions of a pot, or at least fitting a tree. Now, you'll never get these exact unless you have a custom-made pot, but getting them as close as possible will make the tree look a lot more aesthetically pleasing. Now, color is going to play a major part in any kind of pot selection. Evergreens tend to like pots like this, ones that have unglazed or kind of dull earthy tones, things you'd find in clays and soils. The reason for this is they're considered to be kind of masculine trees, and masculine trees tend to live in kind of earthy areas. Now, if you had a pot like this, which is obviously purple, this is more of a feminine color. Now, deciduous trees tend to like more glazed pots, brighter colors. This is because they have fall color. Most of them will produce some sort of fruit or flower. And in general, they're considered to be more of a feminine tree. Cascades have to go in Cascade pots. A Cascade pot is defined by any pot that's height exceeds its depth and other measurements. So Cascades can come in different sizes and proportions and in different shapes. They can be standing rectangles, they can be cylinders like this, and they can even be oblong. When it comes to large leaf trees like these grapes, you're going to need to be putting them in a pot that is also large and deep. The reason for this is pretty simple. Trees that have large leaves, even if you are able to cut them down and get them a little bit smaller, are going to look proportionally incorrect in a pot that is maybe short and small. Now, if the tree is also very old, you're going to need to put it in a pot that is both deeper and darker. The darker is only to accent the age. Give it a little bit of mystery if you like. Now, the deeper part has aesthetic and real-life health implications. If the tree is older, it needs more soil volume to absorb water. It also will help it in case there's any type of ill effect. Now, if the tree is physically heavier, both visually and physically, you're also going to want to put it in a pot that is visually heavier. The reason for that is you need to complement weight with weight. If you put it in a smaller, physically lighter pot, then you're actually going to be making the tree look less weighty. Generally speaking, trees that are considered to be more feminine should go in softer lined pots. By that I mean, even though both of these pots are rectangular, you'll notice that this one has no edges, making it a more feminized pot. When it comes to the general shape of the tree, it can also influence the shape of the pot. Trees that are curvy should be put in circular, oval, or oblong pots. Now, if a pot is rectangular, it should have a straight trunked tree. Now, there can be multiple trees in here. You can have straight trunk forest, 2 trees in the pot, clumps, and so on and so forth, but it should be all growing straight up. Now, if you have a very odd-shaped tree, it should be complemented with a very odd-shaped pot, the same way that someone who is an odd person may dress very oddly. Now, when it comes to cascades, there are some pretty strict rules. The first, obviously, is that they have to be in a pot that is tall. If they're in a shallow pot, well, that doesn't really accent the height of the tree, does it? The second one is that the tip of the tree, the cascading tip, can never come into contact with the ground or a bench. The reason for this is pretty simple. If a tree touches the ground, it's going to naturally want to either grow up or along the ground. If this rosemary were to come into contact with soil, it'll start to root, simply because this is one of the ways that rosemary reproduces. So as a practical and as an aesthetic quality, you want to make sure that your tree is up high. Now, you can put it on anything if you need to, even an old plastic container like this one. Forest, twin trunk, and raft style trees have a little bit of a different proportion and pot measurements. First off, they should be in shallow, oval, circular, and oblong pots. The way you get the proportions is you get the height of the pot by measuring the tallest tree and using 1/3 of that measurement. You get the length of the pot by using the same measurement and using 2/3 of it. Now, you cannot always use these measurements because forest plantings tend to have a lot more trees in them, which sucks up a lot more water and makes it more difficult for them to stay wet. So you might have to be putting them in a larger pot. Now, it's always better to have a aesthetically less pleasing tree than a dead tree. When planting a tree directly onto a stone, you still have to make some general aesthetic and real-world decisions. First, the stone that the tree is on has to be solid, not easily broken. Granite works good, quartz crystal is good too. Now, the stone has to be very aesthetically flowing into the tree. If you have a relatively young tree, not so old, not so rough stone works. A rugged tree goes in a rugged stone. Now, if you have a tree on a stone and that stone is in a pot and you're doing root over rock, you have to match the stone to the pot and to the tree together. That can mean having a dark stone has to be complemented with a dark pot. A white stone, a white pot. It should add to the effect, not distract from it. When it comes to Bun Jin, there's a few things you have to really consider. One, handmade pots are the best. It helps accent the ruggedness and kind of the oddness of Bun Jin. They also tend to prefer to be shown in shallow pots, oval, circular, and oblong. The one that we have here is in a rectangular pot, largely because we wanted to show off the difference between the Bun Jin shape and the conformity of it. Also, if you notice, this is the tree our logo is based off of. Fruit and flower will play a lot in selecting a pot for a tree that you're hoping to show while it is fruiting or flowering. Now, bring up the thing. There we go. As you can see on the chart, it's pretty easy to select either a complementary or a contradictory color, depending on what you're hoping to do. Finding the front of the pot can be pretty important as well. With circular pots, the display angle has to be directly on the foot, meaning with the foot facing forward, or with the foot gap facing directly forward. You want it to be the center of the foot gap. Now, if you have one that doesn't have feet and they have cutout slits, either the cutout slit facing directly towards you or the cutout gap facing directly towards you. Now, with rectangular pots, pretty simple. The broad face faces you. There are some people who will display them like this if they're having a forest with a path. Now, if you are displaying something like that, this is more of Pen Jing, but more power to you. When it comes to tall cascades, the angle points towards you, meaning your tree will cascade like this, and this angle will face you. This is also the same for tall hexagonal pots and cylinders. Now, if you have a short hexagonal pot, the face faces you, meaning the hard angle. The sharp angle points to each side. And that's basically everything you need to know about choosing a pot for your bonsai. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like the video, find us on Facebook. You'll find links to everything in the description below. If you have ideas for future videos or have questions, put them in the comments section. And if you feel like it, visit our online store. We've got trees, pots, t-shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. Alright, I'll see you next time.